Hey everyone, welcome back to Locker Talk. I'm Sam, and this week's episode is a little different. Normally, I'd spend these few minutes talking about a specific behavior, a specific challenge that we're facing out there in the world, but today I want to pull back the curtain a little bit because if you've been following me for a while, you've probably noticed something. Over the last few months, I've been talking more about youth sports, more about athletes, more about confidence, pressure, coachability, emotional regulation, the human side of athlete development. Sure, I've been talking a lot about careers and pivots and dropping little hints about kind of what I've been working on. And if you've known me primarily through my career coaching and leadership work, you might be wondering, where's all this coming from? And the honest answer, it's been there the entire time. I just didn't maybe pull the connection of everything together until I really stepped back and looked at the bigger picture. For years, I've been helping adults navigate pressure, career transitions, leadership challenges, feedback failure, confidence, the moment when life asks more of us than we feel ready to give. Have you been there? And over thousands of conversations, I found myself becoming fascinated by a question, right? Where do these patterns really begin? Because the more adults I worked with, the more I realized we weren't usually talking about isolated workplace problems. We were talking about patterns, patterns about how they responded to pressure, how they handled failure, how they received feedback, how they recovered from mistakes, how they led themselves. And the more I paid attention, the more I realized something. Most of those patterns don't start in adulthood. They show up much earlier, sometimes decades earlier. And one of the clearest places to see them is youth sports. And that might seem a little bit crazy, but think about it. Where else do we repeatedly put young people in situations that involve pressure, expectations, mistakes, competition, feedback, success, failure, teamwork, leadership, responsibility, and emotional adversity? Sports are full of those moments. Every game, every practice, every season. Sports reveal behavior under pressure. And that's become one of my strongest beliefs. Pressure really reveals behavior. Sports simply make those behaviors really easy to see. The athlete who shuts down after a mistake, the athlete who gets defensive when coached, the athlete who loses confidence after failure, the athlete who performs differently in games than they do in practice. Those aren't just sports moments, they're human moments. And over time, I noticed something that I just couldn't stop seeing. And if you followed my early lead the game work, you probably read a lot about this in my early blogs. And the same behaviors I was helping adults navigate at 35, 45, 55 years old were showing up in athletes at 9, 10, 11, 15, different environments, same patterns. The reason I pay attention to youth sports is because I already know where all of these patterns lead. I know what happens when someone never learns how to recover from mistakes. I know what happens when feedback always feels personal. I know what happens when confidence becomes attached to outcomes. I have talked to a lot of mid-career professionals about that one. I know what happens when pressure consistently overwhelms performance. I've seen those stories play out later in careers, leadership roles, relationships, and life. And that realization led me to start building something, not sports psychology, not mindset coaching, not mental performance, not skill development, something different. What I've been developing is what I call athlete performance behavior development. The idea is simple. We spend thousands of dollars developing athletic skill. I mean, you can look up all the research on the youth sports industry right now. It's a bit crazy. Almost nobody is intentionally developing the performance behaviors underneath it, the behaviors that shape confidence, coachability, resilience, emotional regulation, ownership, decision making, the behaviors that ultimately determine how much of an athlete's talent is actually available when pressure shows up. That's where the performance athlete blueprint that I created comes up with, the athlete performance profile, the athlete performance leadership index. I wanted ways to help parents and coaches really understand how athletes respond under pressure. Not guess, not do this fun trial and error dance we do as parents, but really understand. Because once you understand the pattern, you can start developing it intentionally. And then that leads to something else. I realized that many of the behaviors parents were seeing on the field weren't just performance behaviors, they were actually leadership behaviors in kid form. So I built the Athlete Leadership Performance Index, what I call ALPI, because if we translate leadership research into youth sports, what we're really measuring isn't leadership as a vague concept. Like, is my kid becoming a better leader? Do I feel like they're becoming a better leader because they're playing sports? No, what we're measuring is repeatable behaviors under pressure. What does ownership look like? Coachability look like? Team impact, game presence, competitive responsibility, game awareness and judgment. In other words, we're measuring the very things that later become accountability, learning agility, emotional intelligence, resilience, work ethic, decision making, the things organizations spend billions trying to develop in adults. And that's where this whole journey's led me to a belief that I don't think it's talked about enough. Sports reveal leadership long before adulthood does. The athlete isn't just learning to play baseball or basketball or soccer, they're learning how to handle mistakes, how to receive feedback, how to respond to adversity, how to contribute to a team, how to manage emotions, how to lead themselves. And those lessons don't stay on the field, they travel with them into classrooms, careers, leadership, relationships, into life. So moving forward, you're going to see a lot more of these conversations from me. More youth sports, more athlete development, more pressure, more confidence, more coachability, more leadership. And if you're someone who originally followed me for career and leadership content, don't worry, we're still talking about the exact same thing. We're just starting the story a little earlier in youth sports because what I'm really interested in has never changed. I'm fascinated by what pressure really reveals in us and how we intentionally develop what that pressure exposes. And I think that's one of the most important conversations we can have. So thanks for listening. I am excited for this next phase of this journey. What you'll see from a practical standpoint is on Mondays, we will have an article that comes out that's all about youth sports. On Wednesdays, the Locker Talk podcast will come out, and that will bridge the story into Friday. And that post will really talk about what we saw on Monday and how that shows up in adulthood by the end of the week. So in a whole week, we're getting the span of a lifetime on one topic, one skill, and how what we help our kids with and what we help our young athletes with, and how that shows up later on when they launch out of our lives and our houses and into adulthood in this crazy, crazy world. So I really hope that you'll be on the journey. I am super excited about it, and I think it's going to be something really special. So, as always, I hope you put down the popcorn and get in the game.